I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of like my context so that you guys understand what I'm using um, my iPad for and what division I'm teaching and all of that stuff. And then also ask you guys a little bit about what your contexts are, because sometimes the technology, well, I guess all the time with educational technology, the most important thing is to make sure that we're using it for enhancement of our lessons and not necessarily just replacing something that you could have done, without technology. And so I think, I guess without further ado, I'll get started. So first off, um, this is essentially what we're going to talk about, but I'll introduce myself a little bit. So my name is David Herrera, or David Herrera. That's how you say it in Spanish. I'm a Spanish physics and science teacher in high school, in Queen Elizabeth High School. And I currently serve in the role of department head of technology. And so I'm in charge of helping implement technology across my school. And then a part of that has been a push for getting more and more people to use some of the iPads that we have in the school and trying to get them to use them in the most, I guess, the most effective manner for them in their classrooms and how it serves their students. So some of the iPad apps that I wanted to talk about today are apps for enhancing your lessons, some apps for lesson planning that can really help you in your day-to-day, getting stuff ready and maybe planning some stuff up. And then the other thing as well is for exploring concepts further. So giving students like, hey, here are some things you might want to take a look at. And some of these will work on devices that the students can have. Some of them might link them to a video or something that they can watch afterwards. But it can also be for further exploring some resources that you can use in your classes, in your lessons. So as I was mentioning before, this is the school that I am currently working at. It's called Queen Elizabeth High School. And if you're familiar with it, it's in the north central area of Edmonton. We serve a very diverse population. And so we have a lot of different programs like the ISP program and interactions programs and all of that stuff. And so like any high school in Edmonton, we have a very diverse population. I find that as a science and Spanish teacher, it really gives me an opportunity to flex a little bit more of my muscle in terms of the varied instruction techniques that you can have with technology. And so I find myself using my iPad in every single lesson, but a little bit differently. And so I think what I'll get everybody to do next is just kind of like, tell me a little bit about your context. Hi, Kyle. We just started, so don't worry. And so I guess that's going to be my question for everybody here. What is the division that you're working in? What subjects are you teaching? What's your tech background in terms of like how comfortable do you feel using technology? Are you already implementing some stuff in your classroom? Maybe do you have access to an iPad? And so on. So does anybody want to go first?
Well,
Oh, please go ahead, Randy.
I teach at Center High, and what I do is the tutoring for social studies, which is for the most part online, and they give iPads to all of the tutors. And I do look after all the tutors, and so some of the math and science tutors do use the iPad, and I'm curious to see how they can use it and if there's anything I can suggest that they make better use of it. To tell you the truth, in social studies, I don't know in what context I would use the iPad, because I'm just usually using the computer. But so that's why I'm just kind of here to learn about how the iPad can be applied.
For sure. I have a quick question. So when you say tutor, are these student tutors or are they like adult tutoring students?
No, because our school goes up to 19. So there are students in our school that just need a little extra help in the evenings or late afternoons. And they log on with me online or the other tutors online.
And are they assigned iPads to take home, or are they working with you at like?
all of the tutors are given iPads. I have an
Mhm.
iPad, but I tell you the truth, I haven't used it for tutoring.
Gotcha.
All the tutors are given iPads. I understand they're quite useful for the math tutors and the science tutors. The students themselves may not have access to iPads.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so yeah, we'll definitely get into a few suggestions for some things you may want to look at. I'll tell you a little bit about how I use my iPad, and then hopefully we can come out of this with a few ideas of how we can implement that. Yeah. Anybody want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next.
Awesome.
I could pick. I'm actually a tech with Edmonton Public Schools, so I work with ITS. Much like I guess David, you probably know Eric Carlin out there, right, at Queenie.
Yep.
Yeah, so I supervise a group of techs in Southeast Edmonton, right, and we support about 50 schools. So
Gotcha.
a lot of teachers have iPads, and I set up and manage the iPads. I push apps out to them, right? Some of the cool ones I just set up recently was like, can't recall the name of it now, but it was for a couple of math teachers at T. Baker, and they're annotating on their iPads, and it's displaying up on their smart board, right?
Yep.
So my reason for joining this today was just to get maybe some more information on the different types of apps for different classrooms, so that I could, recommend stuff to teachers.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Yeah, we definitely, I have one in particular that I'm a huge fan of in terms of annotation, and I'll tell you all about it because that's like my daily driver. I use it all the time. I guess Kyle, you're last.
All right. Kyle, I'm new to Edmonton Public. I've actually only been working with them since the start of the year. But in the past, I've had the privilege to teach like chemistry with a tablet, never an iPad, just with a tablet. So I was just annotating those before, but interested to see what's available with. I only have an iPad for personal use, but maybe I can use it in the classroom.
Gotcha. So I'm guessing since you're teaching chemistry, is this high school or junior high?
Yes, this was junior high.
Junior high. Gotcha. Okay. So I guess let's move on to, because I want to talk about a whole bunch of different apps that we can use, but I also wanted to discuss a little bit about the ease of usability of an iPad. And so the really nice thing about iPads is that it depends whether it's the teacher that has the iPad, whether your students have access to the iPads. I'm mostly going to focus on staff members having iPads because that's the most common use case scenario that we see in Edmonton Public, where it's just the staff member that has an iPad. And then how can we really use that to enhance some of our lessons? So the first one that I'm going to talk about is going to be GoodNotes 5. And this really does the bulk of my work on an iPad. Has anybody heard of GoodNotes 5 before? Been using? Yeah, Karen? Okay, so this is a note annotation app, and I'm going to mirror my screen from my iPad here so that you can take a look at how this works. But essentially, the iPad is a fantastic tool. The way that I think of it is just like a mini computer that you carry around in your hand, and it really empowers you to do so many things when you are, when you're giving a lesson. One of the biggest things is that you can walk around, and the ability to not be tied to your desk or to the screen to have to advance every time you have to tap the screen is fantastic. And it's one of those things that I can never go back to now. And so GoodNotes 5 really allows me to do that in a really easy way. So I'm gonna show what's happening on my screen here. And first off, this is what I'm seeing on my iPad. I hope you guys can see that on your screens there. If you want to just make my screen a little bit bigger, just go ahead and hover over my camera and click on pin. And then it's like a little push pin. And then you can see my picture a little bit bigger. But this is essentially what I'm seeing on my screen. Now, the iPad, in terms of teaching, I find you have to get a stylus to be able to get, everything that you can out of an iPad. Because otherwise, we're just using our fingers, and there's a lot that we can do. But with the pen, it really opens your whole workflow up to so many different things that you can do. So GoodNotes 5, think of it essentially as like a PDF program that you can edit, you can write, you can do all sorts of things. And it's really so powerful. And it's the sort of stuff that, we're always thinking about. We're always thinking about the different stuff that we want to be able to do on like Adobe Acrobat or whatever. And if you're not sure what that is, it's just it's a program on a computer. But just going to show you a few of the things that I can do really quickly. So the nice thing is once you have files that are saved on Google Drive, for example, I put up all of my notes, worksheets, whatever on Google Drive, and you can very easily just export them from Google Drive onto GoodNotes 5, and then you can write all over it. So this was a worksheet that I gave to my Science 10 students. And of course, the first thing that you can do, if you can kind of see all of the little icons at the top over here, okay? The first one is just like a pen annotation tool that you can use. But if you tap on the colors over here, you can use different colors. You can change the thickness of the writing. And, that's nothing too crazy. You can use annotation on a whole lot of things. You can erase, and you can erase by stroke, meaning like if you write a huge line, you can just like tap that line somewhere and it erases the whole line. Or you can do something called a precision eraser, which is only going to erase like the part that you are touching. So for example, here, I can erase just like the little corner of this guy over here. One of the things that I really like about GoodNotes 5 is that it has a highlight function that is super, super well implemented, which means if you're trying to highlight something, let's say I'm trying to highlight the title on here, it actually does this thing where it puts the highlighting behind the text, and it makes it so easy to read that when you're highlighting and you're trying to read through documents, it doesn't create this huge mess where it's just kind of hard to read because there's all of these different colors on top of the text. And I find that to be really cool. There's a couple of other things that you can do as well, like, for example, draw specific shapes. And so if you touch on this thing, the shape tool, it allows me to draw a little square, and then it's just going to automatically try to make the best square that it can. You do have to be a little bit careful in terms of like, how well you draw them. If you try to do a circle, it's going to draw a nice little perfect circle. And then I think the most useful part of GoodNotes, I find, is the little lasso tool, this thing right here. Because this is one of those things that as a messy writer myself, when I was in high school, I always found myself running out of space when I was trying to write stuff. And the lasso tool allows me to move things around wherever I want. It allows me to resize things to make them smaller, bigger, turn them around, whatever. So I find that if I'm ever running out of space and I'm trying to write something, I can just kind of resize it, move it out of the way, and then all of a sudden I have a huge amount of space to be able to work with. And that's just some of the things that I can do on here. You also have different tools for being able to add pictures onto here. One of the most powerful tools that I've found with my iPad and GoodNotes is to be able to take pictures and immediately be able to edit them. So for example, if you tap on the little picture button here and then go to the camera, you can take a picture of something. So this is something that I have in my on my desk right now. I take a picture of it, and then you can go to use photo. And obviously you can make this like as nice as you need it to be. But once you have it on your screen, you can resize it, you can make it bigger, whatever. But right now, just for the purpose of being able to show what's happening, I can just take a picture of this. Let's say I'm working on a worksheet. And I forgot to have a digital version of it. I can just take a picture of it in front of me, and then I can start annotating all over it, write over it, do whatever I need to. And this, as a science teacher, is actually super, super helpful. Now, all of this works great, but the thing that I really like about GoodNotes is that it has this feature that allows me to hide everything that you are seeing right now in terms of what we call the overlay. This is all of this blue stuff on top, all of the pens. It has a mirror presenter page setting right here, where as a student, all you're going to see is just the document. You don't see any of the background behind the scenes stuff that I'm doing. It also has a little pointer setting where I can say like, okay, guys, like look at this right here, and I can kind of point it out. So GoodNotes really is super powerful in terms of being able to use this to replace something like Smart Notebook or OneNote. And the nice thing about GoodNotes is that I found it to be a lot more reliable than OneNote, for example. I've had a lot of staff members use OneNote in the past, and then they run into problems with their Microsoft account. And unfortunately, as Edmonton Public, we don't work with Microsoft. And so that means that whenever there's issues with a Microsoft account, I have to be like, sorry, you got to contact Microsoft and then hope that they're able to figure out where all of your notes went and all of that stuff. GoodNotes 5 links to whatever Apple ID you're using on your iPad. And so whenever I have a staff member that's using an iPad, I get them to set up their iPad with a Apple ID based on their school email. And that just kind of solves everything in terms of backing up all of this information. If for whatever reason you switch to a different iPad, everything just transfers over so easily, and it works really, really well. And of course, because the iPad is not tethered to anything, I can walk around my classroom. If there's some students that are being annoying in the back, I can go stand next to them and kind of give class from there. And everybody's still looking at the screen at the front and everything that I'm doing. And it just really frees me to be able to improve things like classroom management. If there's a student that wants to answer a question, I've done this before, and in the age of COVID, this is a little bit sketchier, but you bring some hand sanitizer, you say, sanitize your hands. Okay, write down the answer. And the kids are so excited sometimes to just write on the iPad, but they're like, oh, I want to try. And then they just, write the answer on the iPad, and it works really well. And it's a lot less disruptive than like, here's a pen, go walk to the front of the class, right? Which, sometimes they do need that little bit of time and whatever it is, but I do think that it does help a lot in that regard. So that's GoodNotes 5. Does anybody have any questions about GoodNotes? Anything that you want to know whether it's able to do or anything at all?
Is it a free program?
So GoodNotes 5 is not free. However, it's very affordable in terms of the pricing for it. There's a lot of apps that do the same stuff as GoodNotes 5, but they've moved to a subscription model, which means every year you have to pay like $20 or something like that. GoodNotes 5, if I'm not mistaken right now, is about $15 per license, or $13, about that, but that you pay it once and then you have the program for however long. And so this is something that I would discuss with the tech lead at your school. I think it's Nicole at Center High, if I'm not mistaken.
Karen Belcher.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they can discuss with our ITS co-workers how to implement that, and we can get the licenses and stuff. Getting the licenses in bulk allows us to save a little bit of money as well. So what we did here at Queenie is we just said, you know what, whether or not you're using GoodNotes 5 now, we pushed GoodNotes to everybody, and then we've been slowly migrating people over to GoodNotes. Obviously, like if they want to stay on OneNote, that's the other great thing about iPads. There's an awesome OneNote app, and there's a lot of staff members that are still using OneNote. If you're wondering what all these other programs are, feel free to just ask like, hey, what is this? OneNote is just another program made by Microsoft that is very similar to this. So, for free. Oh, okay. Yeah, see, I didn't know that part, but that's awesome. So yeah, that's my huge recommendation. I think any teacher that's going to be using an iPad for instruction, I think GoodNotes 5 is a must-have, just because it's so flexible in terms of everything you can do. But I didn't even get to my favorite part of GoodNotes 5, which is, and I'm just going to go back to the full screen presentation. It's how easy it is to share all of the documents that I've created here. So on the little share tab on the top left of the screen up here, when you tap on this, it allows you to export all of the document or only some part of the document. And you can immediately export this. You can call it whatever it is you want to call it. It'll ask you, do you want to export this as an image? Do you want to export it as a PDF? Do you want to export it as a GoodNotes file? Honestly, I always keep it as PDF because that's something that any computer device, whatever, is able to see. And so you just kind of leave it the way that it is, and you tap on export, and then it says, how do you want to export this? And so you have the option to export to Gmail and immediately mail a document to anybody else. You can put it to Google Classroom, and this is what I usually do. So if I want to upload directly to Google Classroom, I just go directly right here, and it allows me to make it as an announcement, put it as an assignment, as a create material, whatever. And so in high school, I know that there's more and more schools that are asking teachers to make sure that their notes are posted on Google Classroom. This is something that allows me to do it in like 2 seconds. You click on export, tap to which classroom you want it to send it to, and then it just gets uploaded. And there's no having to store it on Google Drive, then go into my computer and then upload it to Google Classroom and then make sure that it has, like, you just do it all in one step. And it's so easy. And that's something that has won over so many of my staff members in terms of using GoodNotes. So if it sounds like I'm a little obsessed with this app, it's because I am. It's literally like my workhorse for everything I do on the iPad. But there's a lot of other things that you can do with the iPad. So let's go back to some of the other apps. The other one that I wanted to talk about is just Google Slides. And I know that this is just kind of like a, well, duh, it's part of the G Suite. Yeah, the Google Slides implementation on iPad is actually really, really well done because it allows you to use things that your computer doesn't have, like a good camera. And you can immediately post things and take a picture and add it to whatever slideshow you're working on, and you can completely edit your slides on iPad. Now, the main limitation of iPad, and this is a document that I was sharing with my students. If you can't tell, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So I was teaching my Spanish class about all of the different Latin American actors that are now in Star Wars. The big limitation of iPad is obviously having a keyboard. On-screen keyboards are not great, but they get the job done. And if you need to update a slide really quickly, you can go ahead and do that, and it works really well. So in here, I can go through all of my slides. I can change things. I can add pictures, comments, shapes, lines, everything you can think of that you want to do on the desktop version, you can do that on the iPad version. And you can also just present directly on here. Present to external display. And then you don't see all of the overlay that we had from before. And the nice thing is on my iPad, I have a little presenter view. And so on here, if I have, sorry, I'm just going to lower this. If I have speaking notes, you can see them on the iPad, and you can walk around, read your speaking notes while you're also looking at which slide you have up ahead. And so it's just like a really nice way of presenting slideshows. So again, when we're talking about like, am I just replacing my computer with the iPad? Technically, yes, but at the same time, I do find that the enhancement of being able to walk around your classroom and maybe like, you know, point to different things and just like, hey, I also have a demo that goes along with this. Let me stand next to the demo and not have to run back and forth between my computer and the demo, or like tapping the screen and the demo. And I don't know if anybody has seen this problem now where Google got away from just tapping the screen to move forward, and you have to do this ridiculous like slide in order for the thing to you know, go forward. Yeah, you can just kind of skip that here because you can just go on to the next slides, and it works really well. So Google Slides works awesome on iPad. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is a little bit more science-based, is SparkView. SparkView is a little bit harder for me to demo because SparkView is an app that works with certain science tools that come from a company called Pasco. But if you're a science teacher and you're in a relatively new school, and even some older high schools like mine are starting to look at some of this equipment, but they're essentially like physics and chemistry and bio tools that communicate through Bluetooth to an iPad or a Chromebook or whatever. And they allow students to play around with the data a lot easier than before. So when I went to high school, I had to do a lab where essentially it's called the ticker tape lab for physics. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but essentially you have like a little cart and then it runs, and there's a little like electrics, like ticking zapper that just kind of like burns a tape. And then you're supposed to measure that, and then you write it down, and then you have to draw a graph and everything. This kind of just does it all right away. And so I found that it really allows students to think a lot more about the why behind things in physics, rather than just like, okay, we're going to spend an entire class graphing and writing things down and calculating and stuff. And it allows me to do things like, okay, let's take a look at a motion graph of what happens when a car goes back and forth. And then they're able to put together kind of like, oh, that's what's happening. That's why the graph looks like that, and so on. And it's really been super powerful in terms of doing that. Of course, the only limitation with SparkView is that you need to have the Pascal equipment. And so in order to do that, if you're a science teacher, you may want to talk to your lab technician or maybe your department head and see if you do have any of these. And if not, then maybe, ask around and be like, hey, is this something we can get? Is this something we can take a look at? Maybe do a little bit of reading on it ahead of time, but it does work really, really well. And then the last one is just how powerful the processor of the iPad is for things that used to be very difficult for a computer to do. So I remember when I was a kid, one of the first things that I learned how to do on a computer was make like a slideshow. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, this is really cool. What is this like movie making program that's on my computer? And I learned how to make a stop motion movie. And for some of my assignments, what I've done for my students is I say, you know what, your favorite thing to do is not writing. How about you present this information to me in a way that allows you to kind of express yourself? We talk about multiple and varied forms of assessment, and I think electronics and electronic devices really allow us to empower students to just show their knowledge in a bunch of different ways than they could before. And so there's this really cool app called Stop Motion Studio on the iPad, and it's free. And essentially what it does is it allows students to make a stop motion movie in less than 15 minutes. And stop motion, if you're familiar with it, is essentially a type of animation where you kind of like move an item, take a picture, move an item, take a picture, move an item, take a picture. And it kind of demonstrates how animation used to be, right? Like if you think of like the old Disney movies where they drew something and then like move them a little bit, drew it again, move them a little bit, drew it again. That's essentially how it works. And so to demonstrate that, a couple of days ago when I was playing around with some iPad apps for this presentation, I was creating a video, which I'm going to try to share with you if I can find it. Here it is. Nope. Sorry, let me start again. Okay. Stop Motion Studio allows you to make a really quick video where you can have students demonstrate a certain topic by animating it. And this, granted, this video is like about 8 seconds long, but it took me about 10 minutes to make, maybe 15 minutes to make. Obviously with some, toys that I had lying around. But that's just kind of how stop motion animation works. And when we're trying to provide our students with different ways to demonstrate their knowledge, I've found that videos is something that students are really excited to do. And I've also found, speaking to some elementary teachers, that stop motion is something that students just kind of like, they get because they're so used to animation. And especially now, there's a lot of high profile movies and shows and everything that are coming out in stop motion. And so students are like, oh, you mean like so-and-so, and I can make something that looks like that? For example, one of the biggest movies that just came out in Netflix is called Pinocchio, and that was entirely filmed in stop motion. And it's just a cool way to get students to explore topics in a different way. The other thing, of course, is just iMovie. Now, iMovie is free on any iPad, and it's a super powerful tool for being able to produce videos. So I wanted to show, how iMovie looks like now. It's very different if you've used iMovie in the past. On the iPad, they've actually created these templates for creating a movie. So this template could be used for something like English or even social studies if a teacher assigns like a certain topic to a student. And it gives them the template for what they're supposed to film. So if you can see on the left-hand side over here, it'll say like, okay, the introduction for your video, give it a title. And then it tells you like, oh, try to film yourself standing like this. And then it'll say like, okay, move to a medium shot of the book. This is for a book report, but you can do this for any topic. And it says like who are the main characters, show what the setting might look like. You can set up like different titles and all sorts of stuff and make like a really cool looking video. And it just kind of walks students through the steps to do this. Now, these last two apps, the Stop Motion Studio and iMovie, do require the students to have access to the iPads. But at the same time, this is something that you could do yourself if you wanted to make a video to show your students. Or, for example, if you're looking at things like a flipped classroom and you want to provide some resources for students to look at home. There's a lot of really powerful tools for video editing and for making your own lessons. And then, like I showed earlier, just uploading them directly to Google Classroom on the iPad. So I know I just kind of explained a whole lot of stuff at the same time. In terms of lessons and assessments, do you guys have any questions about how we can use the iPad for that?
I had a question.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself using the iPad more than, say, your desktop in the classroom? And could you get away without a desktop?
No. I think they are for two different purposes for sure. So in order to use the iPad in the classroom, you need to have a desktop computer because what we're using is Air Server installed on the computer station, on the computer desktop. And that allows me to mirror just the way that I'm mirroring what's on my iPad right now to you guys. That's how I do it to my classroom. And so the iPad is great for some things. As soon as I need to get a little bit more work done in terms of, again, like say I need to make a whole slideshow, I'm not going to do that on the iPad. I'm going to sit down on my desktop and I'm going to work at my desktop because it is a lot easier to do that. Google Slides for the iPad is great for like changing things on the fly or for presenting. But I find that if I need to create a document, if I need to create a worksheet, if I need to check my emails in general because I need to reply to things, I'll usually do it on my desktop. But it is nice to be able to do that on the iPad as well. I just find that it's for a lot less engaging tasks. Like I'm walking over to collaborate with a staff member, I'll bring my iPad and then, oh, like I can also check my email on here. Oh, look, principal just sent an email about a staff meeting tomorrow morning, right? I find that to be super helpful, but the desktop is still something that is irreplaceable, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about was lesson planning. So this is the second kind of overarching topic for iPad apps. And I included GoodNotes 5 in here again, because GoodNotes is fantastic for organizing your thoughts. Because GoodNotes 5 is kind of like this endless canvas that you can just keep writing and writing and writing, it allows me to kind of organize my thoughts and plan my lessons a lot easier. Now, I still have my written up lesson plans on like a Google Drive document, but if I need to annotate whatever, I'll usually do that on GoodNotes 5 and just kind of keep like a clear template. And I'll show you what a clear template looks like on GoodNotes 5 really quick. This is a clear template. And the nice thing about this is, again, you can just kind of write wherever you want to write. And you can say like, okay, lesson plan. This is just kind of like all of the little, what do you call these? Like notepads that I know, like you go to a teacher's desk and there's like a billion little notepads. The nice thing about GoodNotes 5 is that you can just keep those all in one place and you don't end up losing them. And I know myself, I lose those notepads all the time. So I found this to be super, super helpful. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was just using the Google Suite on the iPad. The Google Suite works really, really well on the iPad. And you can use pretty much every single app that you have on your desktop on the iPad. So for example, on the iPad, I have Google Docs, Slides. There used to be an app for Google Meet, but now it's actually implemented onto Gmail. And so you can, check your mail on here. You can open up Google Classroom, and you can control Google Classroom from here. I have all of my classrooms. You can, like I showed you guys earlier, you can upload documents onto here, and it really allows me to get ready for a class by just whatever I have on my iPad and whatever I was going to present. I just upload it ahead of time, and then students can kind of take a look. And then lastly, for lesson planning, I wanted to talk a little bit about Canva. And Canva is actually what I'm using right now to do this presentation. And I know a lot of people have already been working with Canva. I found Canva to be fantastic because it is essentially like a much easier to use Photoshop. The way that it works is you have a bunch of different templates for whatever it is you want to make. If you want to make a slideshow, if you want to make a poster, if you want to make an Instagram post, if you want to make a graphic, if you want to make posters for your classroom, you can do that in Canva. And even if you wanted to make like really cool looking worksheets, you can do that on here. And this that I'm showing you is on the computer, but the Canva app on iPad works exactly the same way. And so you can create slideshows like the one that I'm showing you right now. It's super easy to add new elements onto here and just kind of make it look really nice. I recently, for example, created gift cards for my school, and I designed that in Canva because it's really that powerful and super easy to work with. So I'll show you guys some of the projects that are possible to do on here. I had some of my students work with Canva to present the elements of design for my communications technology class. And they're able to make really cool looking presentations. And again, you can do this on the iPad, but you can also do it on a computer. So this is one of the examples of a app that is just really easy to go back and forth between an iPad and a desktop. So yeah, that's Canva. And then the last set of apps that I wanted to talk about are just kind of what I called further exploring. And so just like resources for apps. The first one I know a lot of people have heard about is called Khan Academy. And Khan Academy used to be a series of YouTube videos that a guy in university decided to make because he was trying to tutor his, I think it was his nephew or something like that. And then he created these videos, and they ended up being super popular because he was really good at explaining certain like high school topics. And so then that turned into a whole company of this guy creating videos for tutoring and all of that stuff. And Khan Academy on the iPad is fantastic. I actually find it to be easier to use than on the computer. And so I'll show you a little bit about how Khan Academy works on here. So Khan Academy, first off, it's free. Everything in Khan Academy is free. And you can go to explore on the bottom here and just see all of the different topics the students can study. Now, this is a little bit more geared towards high school, but you have things like biology, physics, AP, chemistry, all that sort of stuff. And then for every single topic that they have in here, and there's pretty much the entire high school physics curriculum, there's videos, there's practice problems, and it'll go through and work somebody through all of these steps. Now, everything that's available on the iPad is also available on the Khan Academy website. And so if you're just looking to try to explore like, hey, what's out there? What does Khan Academy have for, say, for example, distance, displacement, and coordinate systems? You can check that out on the iPad. And it's a little bit easier to check than on the sorry, a little bit easier to see than on the computer. But as you can see, there's just like really cool lessons, and for reinforcement is usually what I use them for, not for just instruction. So I don't do a flipped classroom in my lessons, but I will give them resources to say like, hey, you know what, we looked at this today. I'm posting this to Google Classroom. These videos, go check them out. On top of that, there's also Crash Course, and Crash Course is also another YouTube a YouTube channel that started creating really good, high quality educational content. And so this app doesn't look great on the iPad because it only works in what we call portrait mode like this. And so it does allow you, however, to look at a whole different host of topics again. So just like in Khan Academy, where there is like bio, chem, whatever, in here they have a few right now, but they are expanding every day. They have things like anatomy and physiology, astronomy, biology for things that we have more normally in high schools, chemistry, and all of that stuff. I would also recommend checking them out on YouTube, but this is a really easy way to find the content that they have. Before I get to Playgrounds, which is the last one that I wanted to talk about, Khan Academy also makes a really cool elementary, or I guess Div 1 app called Khan Academy Kids. And I'm going to try to mute this app because it has a music in the app. But Khan Academy Kids is, again, just another app that has a really cool resources for students. So as a teacher in here, you can create a classroom and then include your students in here. And if you have a class set of iPads, you could be using these for assigning reading homework or reinforcement. There's problem solving, there's math. And so I'll show you what the teacher version looks like. I'm just going to hide my password. Okay, here we go. So I've included some students in here. And before I continue further, just a side note, if you are going to be including students in any iPad apps, please check the third-party agreements and make sure that those students have signed FOIP forms for third-party apps, because that is a requirement for students to be using any kind of apps that are not Google-based. So in here, you have different lessons for things like letters, reading, math, and logic. And so, for example, for teaching students about letters, there's different videos, there's different games, and there's a lot of really cool things that you could also just, as a teacher, show this to your whole class and not necessarily include students in here. You can assign it to students as well. Let's say like I'm assigning it to Aisha and to Pablo. You can save. You can also just preview it. And you can take a look at some of the videos that they have on here. So it says like, give her a G. And so you just kind of like drag and drop. And it's one of those things that it's an educational app that is a little bit more attractive to students that might be in Div 1, and a little bit more familiar with the kind of devices that they might be using at home. And so this could be a really cool tool to help some of our Div 1 teachers. The last app that I wanted to talk about is Playgrounds. Now, this one is more for our STEM students or students who are going into computing sciences, but also just with the new curriculum coming in, there's a little bit more programming being built into the earlier grades. When I say programming, I mean like computer programming. And Playgrounds is a free app for the iPad that teaches students the programming language for iPad. And this programming language for iPad actually has a lot in common with a lot of other programming languages. But Playgrounds is really cool because it packages it all in as a game, and it gets students to problem solve while learning to work with if this, then that statements. And it's very similar to if you've ever worked with things like Scratch or any other type of programming games. But Playgrounds works really, really well. And it's actually really neat because it actually does go through and ask students to, you know, like really think about the problems that they're faced with. Sorry, that's really loud. Okay, I don't think I can make that much quieter. Yeah, if programming is what you're looking for, there's a ton of different apps for programming. Playgrounds is just one of the few that I've been able to sink my teeth into, and I think could be used really well in a classroom because you can assign different tasks and say like, okay, I want you to complete lessons like 1 to 3, and they're just kind of like nicely packaged in a way that you can assign them as a teacher. So yeah, I know I went a little bit overboard because this was supposed to go until 10:45, but that's just kind of like a quick view into the apps that you can use in the iPad. I did want to end with any questions in case anybody was wondering what are some of the things that you might want to take a look at. If you had any questions about my presentation. No? Okay. Well, if you do want to stick around, feel free. Other than that, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have an awesome PD day, and I hope you're able to get something from this presentation.